When I finally booted up Diablo IV recently, it came with a weird mix of curiosity and mild dread. This was my first time playing a Diablo game, and honestly, my first real attempt at this whole genre. For years I'd mentally filed ARPGs under games that looked cool, but also looked like I'd have no idea what was going on, full of numbers, builds and systems that everyone else already understands. Diablo IV felt like the safest way to test that assumption. Big budget, polished presentation, and a reputation for being more welcoming than some of the other games. If I was ever going to see what the fuss was all about, then this felt like the moment. The opening hours immediately did a lot of heavy lifting. The game throws you into a dark, moody world right away, but it doesn't feel eager to overwhelm you. Things are introduced at a pace that felt manageable, even when I didn't fully understand what everything was doing yet. Skills unlock gradually, enemies ease you into the combat, and the UI, while quite dense, didn't feel too hostile. I was still reading tooltips like they were legal documents, but I never felt lost to the point of frustration. It helped that the game clearly wanted me moving forwards, rather than stopping every 5 minutes to study more menus. What surprised me most in those first few hours was how quickly the core loop started to make sense without me consciously attempting to understand it. I'd clear an area, I'd get my loot, I'd equip something that would make me stronger, and I would immediately notice that difference the next time I was in combat. That cause and effect clicked faster than I expected. I didn't need prior genre knowledge to feel progress, and that made the repetition feel purposeful rather than grindy. Each small upgrade nudged me forward, and even when I made choices that were, in all honesty, probably suboptimal, the game didn't punish me for it. There was also a subtle confidence boost that crept in as I kept playing. At the start, every new mechanic felt like something that I was going to mess up, but after a few hours, I found myself making decisions without really thinking about it, trusting that the game would let me experiment and clean up my mistakes later. That shift was important. Instead of feeling like an outsider peeking into a genre meant for someone else, I started feeling like someone who actually belonged here, even if I was still learning all of the intricacies and the language of the game. By the end of those early sessions, Diablo IV had done something I hadn't expected it to. It had made a genre that I had for years avoided feel approachable, even inviting, without stripping away its identity. I still felt like I was playing something new, but it was making sense. I was definitely nowhere near an expert, obviously, and I definitely wasn't playing correctly, but I was engaged and I was genuinely interested in seeing what was going to come next. For a first-time player, that alone felt like a small victory, and more importantly, it made me want to keep playing. Once the combat opened up a little bit, I started paying more attention to how it actually felt to play, because this was the part I assumed would either hook me or completely lose me. From the outside, ARPG combat always just looks like a pure boatload of chaotic nonsense. There's enemies everywhere, there's effects flying all over the screen, and a character somewhere in there that you're controlling, winning through apparently just confidence. In practice, Diablo IV felt a lot more readable than I expected. I always knew what was going on, even when things got busy. Enemy attacks were clear enough that I could tell when I was about to do something wrong, and when I was dodging, I felt like I knew when to do so. I didn't feel like I was just flailing in there blindly screaming, which was a big relief. Playing as the Necromancer definitely shaped that experience. When I picked the class, it wasn't some deep role-playing decision or meta consideration. I haven't watched a single best build guide or anything of the sort. Hell, Necromancer could be the worst class in the game for all I know. I just saw that I could summon minions and immediately thought, well, this seems like the least stressful way to learn how the game works. I can let whatever things I resurrect do some of the work and take some of the hits, whilst I figure out what all the buttons do. That assumption mostly held up, especially early on. Having a small undead support group running interference gave me the breathing room to experiment, to reposition, and to understand fights without feeling like every mistake was a death sentence. When I appreciated this most was how the game let me grow into the class rather than demanding I master it immediately. Early skills that I were getting felt impactful without being complicated, and I could tell what was helping and what wasn't just by playing the game. When I added a new ability or swapped something for something else, the difference showed up immediately in the next fight. More enemies would do more damage, the fights would be faster, I would just feel more confident, I'd take less damage. It created the quiet feedback loop where I was learning through action instead of being told. I was doing things, I was making decisions, and it was either working or it wasn't. That freedom extended to build choices as well. Going in, I was fully prepared to mess something up permanently, lock myself into a terrible class and waste tens of hours. That never really happened. Respecing early on felt forgiving enough that I could try things purely out of curiosity. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but either way I came away understanding my character a lot better, and for a first time player I feel that flexibility really matters a lot. It made the whole system feel like a playground rather than a test. As the hours went on, combat started to feel less like something I was surviving, and more like something that I was controlling. The Necromancer fantasy really started clicking when I was treating my minions as part of a larger toolkit. I wasn't just standing there and watching my skeletons kill everything. I was choosing when to raise them, which ones to raise, when I was going to time all my abilities and everything. I suddenly felt really in control of the fight. That shift did happen naturally, without a moment where the game explicitly made it clear that I was suddenly now ready. By this point, I had realised something important had happened. The class choice that was meant to make things easier didn't keep me passive. It eased me into the systems and then quietly encouraged me to engage more deeply with them. For someone brand new to this genre, that balance made combat feel approachable early on and much more satisfying later. The open world ended up being one of the parts I actually enjoyed the most, largely because it matched the way I was naturally playing the game. I didn't approach Diablo IV with any kind of structure or plan. I wasn't even 100% sure if I'd end up beating the main campaign, which I did. I wasn't targeting quests, I wasn't optimizing routes or thinking about efficiency. Most of the time, I'd open the map, I'd see something I hadn't done, and I'd just go over there and see what was going on. On the way there, I'd get pulled into doing other stuff that I wasn't even intending to do, and that was kind of the loop. What surprised me was how well the game supported that kind of meandering. Almost everything I stumbled into felt intentional, even when it clearly wasn't part of some grand explainable plan on my end. Side quests blended quite naturally into the world, random events felt like small interruptions that were worth doing, and exploration rarely felt quite empty. I feel like if you go into anywhere, you'll get something out of it. I never had the sense that I was wasting my time by going off the beaten path. When it came to the story, my experience was a lot more uneven. I paid attention at the very start, mostly because the opening actually does quite a good job of setting a tone and pulling you into the world. It's pretty damn bleak, the presentation is quite strong, and it feels like the game really wants you to take what's happening seriously. For a little while that did work. Pretty quickly though, my focus drifted. As I got more comfortable with the gameplay, the story started to fade into the background, and I found myself zoning out of dialogue more often than not. That wasn't necessarily because it was terrible, I don't think, but because everything else the game was doing demanded more of my attention. I didn't think that the villain was particularly interesting either. I might be underselling it, but I didn't feel the main reason to be there was the story, and I suspect that's true for a lot of other players. By the time I reached the latter part of my playtime though, I did start noticing a shift in how I felt while playing. There were still moments I enjoyed, fights that clicked, and stretches where the game pulled me along effortlessly, but the initial curiosity that drove me forward initially had softened. I wasn't excited to log in so much as I was now comfortable doing so, and that distinction does matter. I could feel a bit of burnout creeping in, and I hadn't even beaten the main campaign. Some people play this game for hundreds of hours. What really stood out and actually quite surprised me was the lack of any real pull to keep me going beyond what I'd already seen. I know there is a lot more content, there's endgame stuff, people literally play this game for hundreds of hours as I've just said, but I didn't feel compelled to do that. Reaching the idea of endgame content didn't spark curiosity or motivation within me, and that felt like a clear signal. I was satisfied with my time, but not hungry for more. That realisation landed gently rather than dramatically, which made it easier to be honest about it, and that's what I'm going to do. Stepping back from my experience now, I do think Diablo IV succeeds at giving a new player a satisfying and approachable experience. I had fun with the game, and more importantly, it taught me a lot about how this genre works. The systems make sense now. I can now watch gameplay of Diablo and understand what's going on, where before when I'd ever see any gameplay of Diablo, I'd just think that looks like nonsense, but now I do get it. As an entry point, I actually think this game feels approachable, polished and patient in a way that worked well for me as a newcomer. But I am, as I mentioned before, not somebody that's played any of the endgame stuff, so if you were thinking I want Diablo 4 to be my forever game, then you've unfortunately wasted your time watching this video because I can't tell you that. All I can tell you is that finishing my time with the game clarified something for me. Even with a solid experience and a positive impression, this style of game doesn't fully click for me on a personal level. That's not a knock against Diablo 4 or ARPGs as a whole. If anything, it did exactly what a good first experience should do. It showed me the genre clearly enough for me to decide where I stand with it, and for me, that ended up being in a place of appreciation rather than one of long-term commitment. Thank you for making it this far into the video. If you did, I'm going to assume you enjoyed yourself, and if you did that, then you should really leave a like, because it helps me out massively and I would really appreciate it. You can also subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I upload at least one video a week. A few weeks back I ranked every single game I played in 2025, so that is something you should definitely go and watch. But anywho, that is all for now. Have a nice day, and goodbye.